And now the rains we pour is all with no one there to hear. Sorry, I just felt like that one deserved it. Of all of the episodes, that one deserved it. Because we've been hyping it up for the last 8 weeks now. We finally come to the point, easily, arguably, the episode that cemented Game of Thrones' position in the Pop Culture Hall of Fame. Season 3, Episode 9, entitled The Reigns of Castamere, or as it has become better known throughout the pop culture canon, the Red Wedding episode. Pat, welcome back to the show.
So I think the Talkin TV audience here is going to agree with me that maybe you should join the choir.
Oh,
but,
man.
The other thing is, hey, this is the reign of character deaths.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the other thing.
Yeah.
This is the episode, right?
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. All of that and more. Yeah, we're here to talk about that. Obviously, there's more that happens on this episode, but you'll find out. Just stay tuned. All right, Pat, we finally made it. The penultimate of all penultimate episodes. Like, I can't think of, like, I think the last time we had, like, a tragic penultimate episode of, like, an HBO drama series was probably the long-term parking episode from season 5 of The Sopranos, the one where they found out Adriana was a rat and had her killed. Like, that was probably the last time that was tragic. But that was only one death. This is, like, half of the death, half of all the deaths that happened in this entire show. And then the other half happens in the final season with the dragon roasting the entire city. I don't know. What are your thoughts on the stats there?
No comment, man. You know, I think we just need to jump into the meat of this episode.
Yeah,
I feel like, you're talking Sopranos. You know, hey, if James Gandolfini was able to show up in Game of Thrones, I would be all for it. But
I would be like,
you know,
what are you doing here?
It'd be great, you know.
I literally say that. I'd be like, what are you doing here?
He could have been someone in Essos and maybe a Bravian character, you know.
Yeah, with an Italian accent.
Hey, why not? You know, he was a good actor. Listen, it would have been a weird sell. You know, let's say Sopranos ends and then he ends up in the Game of Thrones. But hey, you triggered my brain into a sort of an imagination that maybe shouldn't have been triggered.
Interesting indeed. Nice little kind of segue into the Sopranos land here. But people, as I said, we're here to talk about the Red Wedding, which is obviously known as one of the most monumental events, not only on the show but in television history, just in general. Like, obviously, this is at this point in the show, we'd had Ned Stark's death, we'd had the Battle of Blackwater, but I guess kind of like at this stage in the game, like season 3 is always that weird position where it's like you still have to prove yourself ultimately in like as far as like how far you're willing to take the story in order to continue to engage with the audience. And obviously at this point, like obviously the writers had reached a very critical point in adapting A Storm of Swords. They'd obviously made the decision to split the book into 2 seasons, but the decision to ultimately pick this as the event to end the show on, like Benioff and Weiss have even admitted that the Red Wedding was a large part of the attracting reason for why they wanted to adapt the show. And it shows ultimately, I think, both in the books, obviously, as Martin has struggled and taken, once again, a very long time in order to kind of continue the second sect of the story that occurs after this, while Benioff and Weiss kind of just said, we're going to do what we want, and kind of escalated on the action and the scale while kind of like paying less attention to the story ultimately. But like this really is like the major turning point of the show. So it kind of almost elevates this episode to like a level that is like almost surpassed like kind of the usual like television amount. Like it's obviously been coined in like something top 100 best episodes of television ever written. Obviously like best surprise twists just in general. Like Pat, before we actually get into the meat and potatoes of this episode, I wanted to ask you kind of just like about the storytelling in this episode, because Game of Thrones obviously has a very specific way of telling its story, but it still is able to like kind of follow almost this traditional structure that has been established by previous episodic television before it. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Hey, I think this episode is great for the show because it really takes the breath out of the room. The war is over against the Starks and the Lannisters because guess what? There's really no more Starks to take up the mantle. At least not ones that are going to be able to lead an army and fight Tywin and the rest of the Lannisters on sort of the battlefield that this game is played on at the current moment. So the rest of the Starks are sort of scattering. They're roaming around. They're not really in any position to really mount a fight now that Robb and Catelyn are gone. So, I think from an audience point of view, you're essentially saying like, oh my God, the shoe is dropped. This show is completely different. Like what's going to go on? Obviously this being episode 9 of this season, you get to wait a week before you find out the setup for what's to come in the next season. And I think, next week I'm looking forward to it. We get a couple good things.
Yeah, definitely. Indeed. It's the turning point of the show in so many different ways. Ultimately, it kind of leads the way forward for you're like, wow, what happens now that this is such crucial part, almost the thing that was kind of like still steering like the main center line of the show, right? Because that was like the direct offshoot of the Ned Stark thing, was seeing how Robb was going to avenge his father, and then to not only see him fail, but to see him wiped out in not the exact same manner, but a similar manner of how it's happened to his father. This is another just direct betrayal, but this time from
it's honor again. Like, I need to basically ask for forgiveness, and we're going to make up with it and have this marriage. And, hey, the Game of Thrones is not won that way. And It got Ned Stark. It got Robb Stark. It's one of those things where Catelyn was right. You don't want to trust the phrase. You don't want to trust the Greyjoys. And unfortunately, she was, despite, kicking and screaming, she's like Will Ferrell kicking and screaming into this wedding. Unfortunately,
I usually think of the Noah Baumbach one.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, Will Ferrell is a little funny here. This one was a little more gut churning.
Yeah, there's too many kicking and screaming. What's it called? Movies.
Yeah. Hey, but the soccer one with our favorite comedian here. I think that's the one I'm always putting on the DVR and playing. A little aside there.
Oh man, just a little one. But so you want to get into this?
Yeah. Hey, listen. I think we were talking about this a little bit beforehand, but there's a little scene right with Sam and Gilly at the wall, and what happens in that scene? Like, we might as well start there because.
They just stop at the wall. No, but here's the funniest thing, right? It's so small, it's not even worth talking about. You literally forget that it happens in this episode because the big thing with Sam meeting with Bran happens next episode. But here's the thing. So they arrive at the wall, right? They say they still have to find the night fort, right? But then in the next episode, we see them running into Bran, and I'm like, okay, Bran was definitely nowhere near the wall in the last episode. Like, he was only at the gift. He still had like a little bit more to go. But it's like, you mean to tell me that how it just led me to assume so we know how long the wall is because the wall is like the length of the entire continent of Westeros at that point, but we don't know how wide it is. That's the thing. So you don't actually know how long it takes to get through it. But I got to assume it can't be that long ultimately.
Yeah. Well, ultimately, I don't remember the episode that well, the season finale, but. Is there a sense, do you remember if there's a sense of like a time going by? Because I think that might explain it here. It might be one of those things where like a couple weeks have gone by since the wedding. And
not
that's
sure.
Why they're able
because here's
the
problem. Here's how I know that that's fake. And there's like major time disparities is because the last episode picks up right after the first one where we're still seeing the Red Wedding going on.
They're cleaning up the blood and all that stuff.
Well, they're cleaning up the blood. Well, first we see the massacre. Obviously, Arya wakes up. She sees the freaking direwolf's head strapped to Robb's body, and so that's what's going on. So
Hey, it's like Halloween Kills, It's picks up right up on the same.
We're getting ahead of ourselves here. So
hey, no, I don't know. I'm just saying these names of other properties so that people go on the channel and basically pay attention to those.
Shamelessly plugging us there.
Yeah. Hey, no, they should. They should get your opinion of these other films. Hey, but whatever. Let's move on.
So we've got it's another episode. As far as structure wise, this episode breaks down. We've got another 3 major storylines focusing pretty much all the alternative storylines of what we focused on last week. Last week we saw the beginning of Daenerys' infiltration of Yunkai, obviously with her gaining Daario Naharis and the Second Sons as new allies. Last week we also saw Tyrion getting married to Sansa and that whole event. and ultimately what's it called, Gendry's arc with Melisandre, and Stannis ultimately casting a spell. But this week, we check back in with Yunkai. We have the wrapping up of the arcs within the North, ultimately with Bran and Jon finding themselves randomly in the same location, and obviously everything going on in the Riverlands, not only leading up to the Red Wedding with Robb and Catelyn, but also with Arya and the Hound as they are making their way as well. So
yeah, these weddings, they're not happy endings.
No, they are not. No, they're
you.
not. The fact that this is only number 2 of 3 weddings that we have.
Well, it's 4 weddings, right? Because
4 technically, because Tom and Marjorie, but.
Well, later on, but doesn't Cersei actually?
No, Cersei never actually goes through with it because Tywin dies before they can consummate the marriage.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So that one kind of fades off into oblivion.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been ending the last couple of episodes with Daenerys, but this episode we're going to start with her because this is, I don't want to oversell it, right? Because the Red Wedding obviously looms large over this episode, but this episode also to me in the canon of Game of Thrones works as one of the best because it has such pivotal moments for each of the characters that it's focusing on in it. So in this one, obviously,
I agree with you. I think the Yunkai scenes, like, they're very economical. You know, it's right to the point. You know, we're basically like start off talking about the plan. We have this sort of servant's entrance, and Dario knows the girls there, and obviously he's the romantic type, and they actually really do like him, and so he'll sneak them in, and then they'll go through some streets that he conveniently knows which ones are going to be the less traveled, etc., and then they're gonna, you know, kill some guards and open up the main gates and let the armies in. So opening of this is explaining, to Daenerys what's going to happen, and Jorah basically comes up with an alternative scenario and says, well, no, you're going to lead us in there, you're going to get Grey Worm and myself killed, and Jorah kind of brings up this whole kind of conspiracy, and Dario just looks at him and says, like, you're a very suspicious person, and I believe that those types of people are the ones with the what was it, like, the worst things to hide.
No, those
like
people are
untrustworthy.
Dishonest people are
exactly
are untrustworthy, and that cuts deep because remember, obviously, Jorah Mormont entered this show as an infiltrator and a spy for Robert Baratheon. It's a thing that he's been trying so hard to keep hidden, and that is slowly beginning to unravel as well. And I love the hints that they're dropping right here.
Oh, it's a great subtlety, like having a new character who's just like literally he has to eyeball everybody and make decisions, and he decided to betray his sort of fellow mercenaries, like, just by one conversation with Daenerys, and now he's eyeballing Jorah, and he's basically on the nose, making this decision. He was right about the armed troops in the last episode. So Dario is very observant, very, in tune with who people are. And that's one of his skill sets. I don't know if they continue that really going forward with his character. I think that kind of like diminishes. But I kind of, in this particular season, these 2 episodes that we've gotten, that character trait is pretty cool to add to this character.
Yeah, definitely. And I love how, too, like, when he, like, goes in, obviously, when Daenerys is asking to look for the location, he, like, deliberately takes her arm and puts it there. It's like, damn, dude. It's like, good thing that you're Dario Naharis. He's kind of full of himself. But ultimately, the battle that ensues is, it's funny, I kind of made a note of this. I'm like, it ensues in something like an Indiana Jones style standoff where it's like they're like surrounded by one guy. There's like a bunch of like funny banter between them. Jorah constantly being like, I thought you said you took care of them all. And then obviously Dario firing right back. They've got like a really great demeanor. And then Grey Worm is kind of just a silent, like, badass who like easily takes out like multiple guys with a spear technique. I love like watching their fighting techniques and comparing them to one another. Like, Jorah is obviously like very like straightforward Western fighting style. And then Dario's more fluid, like Dothraki style. And then Grey Worm, like with the twirling of the spear. It's like almost like it's a dance. It's freaking amazing. Like, I don't know. What did you think of how this scene was executed?
Dude, it got me pumped. I like the whole crescent sword that Dario has, the spear that Grey Worm has, and obviously Jorah's like broadsword here. And the fact is, it displays the different fighting techniques of these main characters. To go back to the scene before where they're planning everything, Daenerys looks at Grey Worm and says, "Hey, do you trust Dario? Like, you're a leader too. You got to make this decision." And the fact is, they're speaking Valyrian at this point, and then, Grey Worm responds, "Yeah, I do trust him." And so, cut to this cool bonding scene of the three of them fighting this small troop of guards. Like, I think they get kind of cornered a little bit unexpectedly, but they're able to take these guards out and really show like these are like basically the Three Musketeers, and they're going to be fighting for Daenerys going forward. And I think it's a great moment to have these characters bond and, become part of Daenerys's, city conquering dream team.
Yeah, definitely. Part of kind of, the appeal for me for Daenerys to continue to like that. The thing that kept me interested about reading her chapters within the books as time went on was kind of seeing her growing like kind of posse that surrounded her, but it ended up becoming like almost like this little like band of kooky characters in and of themselves. And it was really fascinating to watch. And I love how at this point in the show, they were doing pretty well with that. Obviously, she obviously had a couple more people with her in the books. Obviously, Sir Barristan had a former slave from the fighting pits in Meereen named Strong Belwas in the books as well, and also she had the leader of the second bounty hunter troop, Brown Ben Plum, but they cut those two characters out ultimately. But still, like her little council is growing, and it's starting to she's starting to really establish her presence. That's why Daenerys is low key like a very underrated arc this entire season. That's why she was even rewarded with an Emmy nomination because of how well thought out it was, and honestly, such a drastic improvement over kind of her meandering and wandering around in Karth in season 2. But what's it called? But ultimately,
let's put Karth back in the vault in the rope nest chapter again. It's okay, but it's one of the more underwhelming parts of her journey.
Most definitely, yeah. Not every storyline in every single season is going to work. So ultimately, Daenerys is waiting in her tent for them to come back. She starts to strike up a conversation with Sir Barristan when Jorah and Grey Worm arrive, and Jorah states that he was right, and that the city has been taken and it is yours. He has a troop of Unsullied behind him, and Daenerys, oh man. Just the reaction here is
her incredible. First response is not like
what happened to Dario?
What happened to Dario? Where is he?
Face sinks.
It's frozen in time. Like he doesn't even speak. He just like stares forward, and then Dario slowly emerges from the background. It's perfect. I think it's a great
perfect
moment.
Perfect timing. I don't think I've ever seen a greater instance of someone getting flat out rejected on screen, like without even realizing, without the one person even realize that she's doing it.
Yeah, this is visual storytelling. Like this is why Jorah, that particular actor, was chosen for this role, is because he says everything that needs to be said about his relationship with Daenerys right there in this single shot. And it's hard to do that as, an actor. It's hard to get to that space and hard to, control your face and know exactly what you need to look like. And, I would be just interested to hear like some of the stories for how that scene was shot and just like what the method was, or just like, how did you achieve it's such a goofy face, but at the same time, it is real. You just see the emotion on the character's face, and it just plays to everything that's going to happen going forward between the two of them.
Yeah, Ian Glen's performance as Jorah Mormont is somebody that we really haven't commented enough on. Since we started the show, obviously way back in April. God, I can't believe we started the show in April. That's absolutely nuts. But it's really subtle, underrated acting. And honestly, like, I think that he deserves a lot more credit ultimately. And I still think that of all the characters who got botched in that last season, I think that Jorah is one of the few who survived. For me personally, I think Jorah, Theon, and the Hound are the three people who actually got pretty great send-offs ultimately. Melisandre ultimately too, but I have a few problems with how that was carried out, but we'll save that for when we get to the final season. But ultimately, how this kind of really ends, because this is really the end of Daenerys' storyline ultimately. Kind of, you have the weird moment where she's like carried by all the people at like the end of the finale, just to like obligatorily get her into the finale. But ultimately, this is still only the beginning of Daenerys' arc, because the whole thing about seasons 3 and 4 is they kind of do work in tandem as one, because they're both an adaptation of A Storm of Swords. So her whole kind of final, that's why kind of, the reason why her whole thing in Meereen next season feels like, like a second half ultimately, because it is that. So at this point in Daenerys' story, we're ultimately still at the halfway point, but it definitely shows that she has come a long way since her Dothraki origins, and ultimately is starting to learn how to become like a ruler just in general. She's become a liberator, and by the end she is ready to become like a ruler and learn how to do that. And that's kind of all been established, up to this point. So moving on to the next major resolutionary arc. I like how I made up that
revolutionary. You telling me Bran and
not
Hodor
revolutionary, not revolutionary. Resolution.
Oh, resolutionary. Okay, good.
Resolutionary.
I thought they were. I thought they were rebellion here.
Rebellion against what?
I don't know, man. Just basically the machine, the wheel.
They're raging against the machine.
Yeah, it's like the only way back in is out beyond the wall, and we're talking about Bran and his journey to go seek the three-eyed raven, and it's really kind of stormy, and they're just kind of in the evening, and they're trapped in an old abandoned mill.
They arrive on the gift, which is, as Bran states, in a little bit of good exposition, but throwing it back to Maester Luwin, rest in peace forever. What's it called? They are on the gift, which is land that was granted to farmers, that was granted to the Night's Watch by Bran the Builder, so they could use, obviously, in order to like form crops and as they come to find out, horses. But so they stop at this old windmill as they're forced to take shelter because of an impending storm. Hodor obviously starts to freak out.
God, Hodor and just his character traits that basically just like come out of the blue. Like now he's like a puppy and he's scared of thunder and lightning, and it's one of those things where it's like convenience factor.
They're definitely that's definitely an instance where they can like kind of make shit up on the fly for him.
It's like
we don't know what someone actually would have done in this time. So
it's like the quote unquote simpleton, as they sort of I believe referred to him as, is basically just scared of lightning and thunder, and it comes at a point where it's just, we need this to conveniently be true. And that's sort of what he starts screaming, and Bran is able to take over and overpower his mind and calm him down. So that the wildlings who are outside don't hear them, and that takes place a little bit after a conversation that they have. I don't want to skip past the conversation.
Well, the whole thing that establishes that literally this is, I think, one of the only instances outside of like the last two seasons in which like simultaneous events in their storylines, like we've had this before where we like have characters in similar settings, but they don't actually have any interaction, like in The Bear and the Maiden Fair when Gendry and Melisandre were traveling on the Blackwater. But this is, I think, the only instance where two characters cross over storylines without realizing it. It's honestly kind of brilliantly
it's some solid intercutting, right?
Absolutely.
Two events happening at the same time, right there at the same place.
Yeah, it's like, absolutely. So because on the other hand, you have Jon and his band of wildlings who are making their way up from the south. They stumble upon this farm. Ultimately, it's kind of amazing to me how like you have these micro events that happen within the backdrop of the major overall story that can still feel super important and engaging. Ultimately, even though they are kind of still polishing off like part one of this next two part story. And so they stumble upon a farm that, as Jon says, he breeds horses for the Night's Watch. Orell and Tormund state that they have to kill him. Jon tries to caution against it because he's obviously against killing an innocent, which the wildlings obviously have no problem doing. And unfortunately, Tormund is not for it. He states that, hey, if any Night's Watchmen do get drawn out, that's more for them to kill. They storm this one poor farmer. Jon distracts him by clanging his sword on the rock. Distracts the farmer. The farmer manages to ride off. The wildlings catch him near the mill. Ultimately, when the thunder is going off, Hodor is freaking out. Orell, Orell hears it. Unfortunately, Tormund manages to talk it down, states that it's only thunder after Bran possesses him. Osha tells Bran to call back the direwolves, Summer and Shaggy Dog, which I thought that was brilliant too, where she's like, hey, we need to back up, magically call our magical wolves to fight. And meanwhile, right outside, you have Jon having to deal with the wildlings who have to kill this old man. I love the interaction that happens.
I don't know what it is when I watched the episode earlier, but like why were they just kind of stumble upon him and take him prisoner? They just kind of
stumbled upon him, and they were like, no, we're going to kill him because he could warn the Night's Watch. He could be a liability.
Gotcha. That's what I thought it was. It's sort of like the same parallel with the Hound and the pork farmer.
Right.
But okay, so yeah, I thought that's what it was, but I guess I must have blanked on that. But the main thing is, I would say, they're basically saying, oh, hey, make John do it. He's got to kill a Northerner. He's got to prove that he's with us, that he's on his side. And John hesitates, and he hesitates way too long. Like
too long.
Egret is like, come on, do it. Remember our, promise to each other? Wink, wink. It's like almost pretty clear that she's like, what the hell? We just talked about this for 3 episodes. Like, get on with it. And she doesn't hesitate. She understands that, these other guys are not going to put up with this. And she draws the arrow and shoots the farmer. He's pretty much, dead, or at least his life is fleeting pretty quickly. And that's when they draw arms against John. They know that
finally voices his realization that John is still a Night's Watchman or a crow, and he will always be a crow. And unfortunately, it's correct.
And what and basically Tormund is kind of lets them have it at each other, right? Tormund goes and subdues Egret, and sort of almost like hey, let them have at it. And John does a pretty good job. Like, he immediately sort of takes some of them out and fights really well. And at the end of the day, he the fight ends with him winning. And just before he jams his sword into, his enemy, he's basically said, you know what? You were right the whole entire time.
Yeah. So satisfying.
Yeah.
Satisfying.
What I think is even more satisfying is, we finally get the answer to the question, what happens when I kill you or you get killed? Does your bird just drop dead in the sky?
That's true. Marketing all the way back to the beginning of the season.
Exactly. And so he basically takes control over an eagle or a hawk, whatever it is, and it attacks John. And it attacks him, and he's struggling. It gets pieces of his skin and everything, and eventually flies away. And John's able to jump on the horse and flee.
I just love the bird effects when it was attacking John, and I'm like, oh man, that's definitely them just like shoving like a fucking like stuffed bird in his face or something along those lines. Yeah, it's kind of hilarious.
But the fact is, like, there's this cool fantasy esque thing where it's like he took control of that bird and his body died, and then he attacked John and the bird flew off. But is the bird free? Is the bird somewhat permanently altered? This whole idea of consciousness being shed is pretty cool, and obviously we don't get any answer to this,
which kind of sucks because there were certain aspects of the books that were dedicated to actually examining that later on.
It would be so awesome if the rest of this series was some bird just following John, and it's
because that's the whole thing too, is that in the books multiple of the Starks are wargs. It's not just Bran. John and Arya have the abilities as well. There wasn't a chance for them to really hark on it because, again, I have a feeling that Martin was going to include sorcery in a much, much bigger way in the last 2 books of the series, ultimately, if and when they ever come out. So that's what kind of makes the sorceress moments that happen in these early seasons ultimately so frustrating, because outside of the White Walkers and the fact that they get weapons to fight them, do they ever really get paid off? Not for my money, at least.
Yeah, you know what, Dom. I think George R.R. Martin, and if he's watching our podcast,
oh man, please let him.
Thank God. But my recommendation is for the last books in the series, he should just hold a contest, and people should submit manuscripts to him, and he should just pick the best fan.
I agree. Fiction. Honestly, I'm with that. I'm with that.
Well, listen, I think from a marketing standpoint, all these sort of runners up and other manuscripts sort of hit the internet. You're talking about just fandom going crazy. So, hey, listen, that's my bit of free advice.
It might break the internet.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, obviously, I'm not a reader of the books. I know that some of our audience and yourself are, basically big fans of the book. So you might want to see what Martin has to bring to the table. But I just think this thing has gotten so big, and we're doing prequels and all this stuff in television form. And that, the books almost, are going to fade away. And I think you can totally, alter it a little bit and allow the sort of fans and the audience to take control over the actual ending of his series. But hey, it's really in his ball court.
Yeah, absolutely. Ultimately. So, moving on, obviously, how they wrap up. John is successfully able to escape after killing Orel, and obviously with some backup from Summer and Shaggy Dog, who are obviously sent to attack the Wildlings. That scene was freaking unbelievable. John, well, here's the thing, though. John obviously recognized them, right? So he knew that Bran was somewhere nearby.
Yeah, and also he escapes with the first couple holes in his body.
Yeah,
he's just not going to fare too well in this series. He's going to get stabbed and punctured, unfortunately. And so here's Ygritte. It comes to see that she does injure him, but everyone knows, like, you could have killed him. Like, you could have you hit him with 2 arrows. That's literally like twice you should have killed him.
Yeah, it's because ultimately she's one that fell for love, and that's ultimately why she dies the way that she does in the next season.
Yeah, well, it's why
we're talking about deaths that haven't even happened yet.
Yeah, it's why Jon Snow knows nothing, right? Because he's doing his thing, and he's running away and whatever, and leaves Ygritte basically betraying her, and she chooses their relationship. She chooses to keep him alive, and it's like he just really doesn't know how life is, and maybe that's something where his honor almost gets him killed here, right? He has a duty to the Night's Watch. He has a duty to the North, to his family, to do what's right. He's doing the whole Ned Stark thing, and he ends up almost dead. So I think and this is not the only time that he's near death in the series.
Consider the fact that he literally finds himself at death's door.
Yeah, so it's one of those things where, like, if you're paying attention, this honor thing is really, really problematic for the characters of this show.
Yes, indeed. Ultimately, so as it turns out, so that is how Jon's arc wraps up. It gets wrapped up in the next episode, but obviously we have the resolution of Bran's arc as well, where after the fact, Bran tells Osha that because Jojen has been right about everything, he has to go north in order to continue to pursue the in order to pursue the Three-Eyed Raven wherever he is. But he does finally tell Osha that he doesn't owe her, that he doesn't expect her to come back north after what she's been through. So that's ultimately what leads to their diverging paths. And ultimately, unfortunately, the last time that we see Osha and Rickon before they're brought back in season 6 to both meet very untimely and very nasty deaths. It's really kind of sad that this is kind of the last time that we see of that storyline. Like, they didn't have too much to do, but like Osha had developed a pretty interesting personality and was kind of awesome to be around for these first couple seasons before we kind of send Bran off with the Reeds on their little magical journey into the snow to deal with ice zombies, but to deal directly with the ice zombies, I should say. But it definitely is, I'll say, it's an emotional send-off, obviously, because, Bran and Rickon's kind of reaction. Rickon's reacting like a little kid would, because he is young. He's the youngest one, and he's been through an unbelievable amount of danger and trauma and survived an unbelievable amount.
You're adding way too much characterization for Rickon. I
get it. You don't like Rickon.
No, I just don't think he's really in the series. Like, he basically, has like similar dreams to Bran in season 2. He's sort of just kind of in the background here in season 3. Then he's off screen for the rest of the series until basically.
They really didn't know what they were doing with Rickon. But in all fairness, Martin didn't either. So
yeah, listen, he doesn't really have to be much of a character, but I even think, like, I guess we'll get there when we get to Battle of the Bastards, but come on, like, I'll say right now, like, Rickon could have survived that pretty easily. easily. He just had to, basically run behind one of the burning, flaying men, and he, arrows would not have killed him. He probably would have had a more brutal death of being caught in that basically when the two armies collide, he'd probably been trampled. But listen, I'm just saying he didn't have to take an arrow. This is
one of the biggest episodes of the entire series, and we're doing nothing but talking about other episodes of Game of Thrones.
Yeah, because here, this is what it is. It's we're watching this probably like third time, fourth time, whatever it is for you and me. And this episode sort of, like I said, it's the changing point of the series from the early episodes to the later episodes. And so it's really invoking a lot of these like thread lines, the stories that as they develop, because everybody is in such a different space. Like everything was so tightly knitted, like Winterfell, and then they went to King's Landing, and then slowly over the 3 seasons, like the characters are traveling all over the place, and the show is getting bigger and bigger. And now I think that the characters are spread out. They're in a lot of different areas, and now these more developed storylines are going to start to evolve over the course of the next couple of seasons before they tame it in and bring it back to the conclusion. And I think this is the most exciting part. So I think us sort of watching it this week and taking a look at this, we're basically getting excited for what's next. And I think maybe we're getting ahead of ourselves. We're supposed to be talking about the Red Wedding, but there's nothing but awesome storylines coming up. And I think that's what we're really jonesing for right here, right now.
Absolutely. It kind of like blows me away how much this episode really is just the finale of the season. And the next episode really is just like kind of an epilogue, because aside from like a few sequences in the next episode, the next episode is mostly just vignettes. There's like kind of one arc that happens. We obviously like kind of Bran and Sam meeting, and then we have I'm literally just doing it. I'm doing it again. And we have Davos and Gendry, but like the next episode is all vignettes. So, but let's get into it. Speaking of the Red Wedding,
now it's time. It's time.
Twins.
All this was a tease up until this moment. We're making you wait.
And the way it's crazy because the episode starts off with it and then kind of uses those other two to like fill in the second half, and then it like kind of spaces it in between. There's no space. We don't get to spend like any time after it. It's just this opening sequence, obviously with Rob and Catelyn talking about they're planning out the invasion of Casterly Rock, and I'm like, oh man, they had to show it to us. They couldn't even they had to like continue to thrust it in.
I think it's one of those things where like they're also talking about just the way the war is going, and it's like Catelyn warned about the whole Greyjoy thing and the phrase, and Rob didn't listen, and it's sort of almost that point where you're showing us, the audience, that like he kind of regrets the way he handled things. Like maybe he didn't heed enough wisdom of his elders, so to speak, that he sort of acted rashly, and sort of like to bring up that one rom-com, Fools Rush In. Well, Rob sort of rushed in. You with the comedies
and the rom-coms today.
I don't know, man. They're just coming to me, I guess. But he just rushes in and he just kind of does his thing, and he's young, he's living life, he's in charge of the North. He's now the king of the North. He's defending his dead father. Like he didn't really have time to grieve. He just like grabbed his bannerman, marched south like with full anger. It's like he won some awesome victories, but he didn't really stop to think about the long game. Tywin is the one who really, is playing that game, understands how it's played. And despite the fact that Rob can beat him on the battlefield, that's not really the game he's playing. And, here we are opening a scene of this episode, and he's still playing, his form of chess, which is planning the battlefield. But he's just so oblivious to what's coming next. And it's the battlefield is not where the game's being played. And he learns that the hard way.
No, it is not. It's so sad what happens here, because Rob is walking into this fully guns blazing, like it's obviously so downplayed when everyone obviously is in the first opening meeting hall. Walder Frey requests to see Talisa, the woman who made Rob break his vow.
Yeah. It's great. It's like I can't see you. I can't see you. These are old eyes.
Incredible acting, incredible overacting from David Bradley, who is just chewing every bit of scenery. It's incredible. And he first obviously shows off all the daughters. He knows that the one that Edmure is marrying is not going to be here. I love watching Edmure's facial reactions in that scene. It is hilarious.
I feel like, before shooting this episode, they had to all sit down as a cast and watch like The Prince's Bride, and this is like the inspiration for this scene.
It's literally what it feels like.
He's going around the room, and it's like they're all like derivatives of Walter, like Wilhelmina and like all this stuff. And
the last one he can't even remember, and it's not even related to it.
Yeah, and he throws out like 6 names, and then she's like, Mary. And it's hilarious. It's just the fact is Walter Frey is the bit of comedic relief that the show needs, and
in a strange way, even though he's an absolute bastard of an old man.
Yeah, he's like one of he's probably one of the more gruesome villains because he helps orchestrate the Red Wedding. But the fact is, I think to the credit of the show and the story, it's Walter Frey is not necessarily a villain. He's an opportunist, and making him a comedic figure in the show where he's sort of just like doesn't know, some of the names of his own family. He's someone that just took the opportunity to get ahead, and it almost like makes him a frivolous character. Like he's sort of like doing this for fun. Just to see the Starks burn. He's not even, and make a little profit. It's one of those things where the Lannisters could easily wipe him out right after this. Like Walter Frey and his family don't even have to control the Riverlands. He's kind of insignificant. He's not really, the most logical, strategic guy.
Right.
He's doing this for other motives, and so he's not like this mastermind. He's not like a Ramsay. He's not like a Tywin. He's not at that level. And I think the comedic humor they bring to his character, makes it clear to the audience, that he is not going to ever get to that throne.
Yeah, as far as the strategy goes, you can also see a lot of Roose Bolton in here as well, because I think at the most all Walder Frey was provide his setting and his troops ultimately, but like the idea of like having them all sit down, all have the wedding, all when they're at their most comfortable, they're most vulnerable, they're most relaxed, that's when you move in for the kill. Like that is something so twisted that it's like, okay, a Bolton had to have come up with that, and that kind of shows Roose Bolton's planning and his cunning, and ultimately just shows like the lengths that he's going to, and he kind of almost acts as like their version of Littlefinger, that guy that was like right in there kind of cautioning them as to what to do, and then when with an opportunity or backed into a corner, ultimately seized on a gigantic opportunity for himself and his family that unfortunately did not involve the Starks coming out alive at all.
Yeah. I think that's a good parallel to Littlefinger. It's like Bolton is, looking for that opportunity to raise his family and his name. I think the parallels between Ramsay and what he's doing with Theon and, what Roose Bolton did here at the Red Wedding. I think that's just amazing. It's a family trait, and ultimately at the end of the day, when we get to later seasons, it turns out Ramsay is definitely, probably because he's a bastard, he never felt like he belonged. The fact is Ramsay, he takes the things that he likes from Bolton, and then he, really has no compassion. He has nothing else. That's the only thing that his, new name gets him is this sadistic, deep planning to really torture people.
Yes.
And he just acts it out. And, I think to see, Papa Bolton have that sort of mean streak in him, and then really see what happens as the show goes on and how Ramsay becomes one of the biggest villains of the show. It's really a nice trick of storytelling where one Bolton passes the baton to the other and really creates like a menacing evil for the later seasons.
Absolutely, yes. The madness and kind of the twisted nature of the Boltons is something that obviously we examine a large portion of later on in the show. But the thing that obviously happens here is that after the opening sequence, I just wanted to note a couple specific things that happen during the feast before the actual Red Wedding begins, ultimately, which is that one, obviously...
It's all about pig's feet.
It's all about pig's feet. Well, no, not Arya, not yet. But as far as, at the feast, ultimately, the Blackfish steps up to go and take a piss. Presumably, obviously, we don't see him again after this episode, but it's later on revealed, obviously, that he manages to escape, muster up a couple of troops, and retake River Run, which was occupied by the Freys, which kind of obviously clearly wasn't difficult because you would think that the Freys would pay more attention to River Run being such an important castle, but clearly not. So that happens, and then obviously the actual what's it called, the bedding ceremony that we missed at Sansa and Tyrion's wedding, where they I'm glad they kind of got rid of that tradition.
Yeah, I think the thing is the fact that Walter Frey does this whole thing with his daughters, and then Edmure is supposed to marry really the most beautiful one of his daughters. Yeah, I think it's one of those great things. It's like Edmure is looking forward to the bedding ceremony, and Robb even says when Talisa basically questions the tradition, it's like, well, this is the way that proves that the marriage was consummated, and that's why the tradition exists. And Robb doesn't necessarily give any hints. Well, clearly he didn't do that because he did a secret wedding, and then Catelyn basically says, Ned forbade the bedding ceremony in their case. Because he didn't want to break someone's jaw on the night of the wedding,
right?
So it's one of those things, like the Starks are a cut above the rest in this case, even with this tradition. And Bolton he's right there next to Catelyn saying this is every bride's responsibility. Everyone goes through it. And that's when Catelyn kind of responds, well, Ned wouldn't have it.
Right.
So it's one of those things where
more unknowing setup for showing that it's like honor till the end.
Yeah. So it's like, the honor you pay a hard price, dealing with that. And, it's like you would say you pay the iron price for honor, indeed. But the iron price is basically you think you're doing something for honor, but you're really just
doing it because you want to.
Yeah, you're just kind of dumb and willing to go through whatever it is you're going through just because you think you can basically handle it. It's
your
like
love, your love of the Greyjoys never ceases to amuse me.
Hey, listen, the Greyjoys, they don't make much sense, logically. I get it. They're different people, and that's why they're sort of small islands, not really ever to conquer anybody. They live this hard life, but it's almost like a hard life they put on themselves. So, it's there is parallels there, to the Starks, because the Starks, had the North, and they had a lot more land, and they had a lot more resources. They had a lot more ability to basically have an army, whereas the Greyjoys didn't. So it's almost like, it's like Bizarro Superman. That's what the Greyjoys are. They're Bizarro Starks. And, it's one of the things where their honor just gets them hardships. And, the show really presents that time and time again.
Yes.
But anyway,
that's an interesting parallel that you bring up. But ultimately, quick check-in with Arya. Obviously, Arya and the Hound have been continuing their journey towards the twins. They also managed to make it to the wedding after robbing a hog farmer.
They're bringing the pig's feet to the dance.
Yes. They've got a couple of awesome scenes together because these two are quickly established to be one of the best pairings. Ultimately, they take what's only a couple of chapters in the book and stretch it out into an entire season of it next season, just because of how good this pairing was.
When the guard comes up and it's like, you got to turn this card around, the feast is over, and it's like, it sounds like it's still going on. It's like, it's over when it's going. When I say it's over, and we got the salt pork, and then when it doesn't work, he's like, we got the pig's feet, and the guard pauses. He's like thinking about the pig's feet, and then he's like, no, get out of here. And that's when Arya kind of sneaks in to see the show. But the fact is, I just love the guard. It's like, when he responds with the pig feet, it's like, are you soft in the head?
Yeah.
It's kind of a small scene, but it amused me tremendously.
Yes.
This whole story arc with the pork cart. It was just amazing. It was well placed. It's part of the production value of this episode for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing. But they arrive obviously when they arrive at the twins, Arya manages to escape, and she's kind of running around trying to find an entrance, trying to find out where her mother and brother are. While in the hall, unfortunately, it begins. The lame Lothar Frey goes up, closes the door, locks it. The music, which has been going loud throughout the entire thing, starts playing the one song, "The Reigns of Castamere." It's really haunting, and the way that the camera hangs and lingers on Kat as realization comes onto her face as she realizes kind of this pit, this tunnel, this trap that they've walked into. It literally feels like, I'm trying to think of like a good description for it. It feels almost like not like, obviously, like what do you call like a house, obviously, where a lot of death, like a mass killing happens. Like there's some descriptor word for it that I'm currently forgetting about, but it's something along those lines where just like kind of the feeling, the despair that's kind of witnessed as they realize what's going on, and how she's the only one to realize it. And it just, I don't know, it kind of makes the act in and of itself almost even more brutal. It's like the Hitchcockian like drawing out of tension.
Yeah, I don't know what the word you're looking for or fishing around for, but like, I'll just say this: it's like, Catelyn starts to realize something is off. A lot of the main, the women are out of the room. It's really just soldiers. It's, Walter Frey's like male family members. There's not that many people in the room that you would call collateral damage for what's about to happen. And, it's very, she starts to pick up on this type of stuff. And this is when Walter Frey is sort of like, oh, I need to offer a gift, and here's my gift to you. And he's kind of rambling. Yeah, he's rambling around a little bit. And this is where she decides.
Lifts up the slip. She notices because of the way the Roose Bolton looks at her. She sees that he's wearing chainmail. She slaps him. She tries to get Rob's attention, but by that point, it is too little too late. The crossbows start firing. The knives and swords are revealed and start stabbing. The one lame Lothar comes over, stabs Talisa in the stomach.
Yeah, he kind of like stumbles over.
Well, yeah, because he's lame. He can't walk properly.
Oh my God. It's just like the detail here, just like this character that is really in the background, just coming up here and stabbing her. The whole and then just the velocity of like how many stabs and just like the shock on her face.
Yeah.
It really turns the stomach. I know I'm saying that and it's kind of a pun, but like it literally like you feel. Like you've been stabbed, watching this, like just the way that it comes together,
like the breath that comes out of you as it's like, ugh, it's still brutal. Like the phrase just slaughter everyone. I think I put in the notes here. It's like the after party happens. Period. Lots of red. I should have put like some more jokes like stabby or something like that. But it's stabby Krabby Patty or something. Yeah,
it sounds like you're being on the nose with your notes.
I'm trying to add some deliberate humor to a very heartbreaking scene. Obviously, Catelyn and Robb both get hit by crossbows. They survive the initial carnage. The rest of the soldiers do not. Obviously, Arya outside begins to witness some more of the carnage once she sees the soldiers turning on soldiers. Ultimately, she tries to free Grey Wind. The soldiers come over, fire crossbows in. They kill even the dog, man. They kill even the wolf. They let no soldier live except for the Tullys ultimately because they have one captive who they need, obviously, and then they have one who just escapes.
Yeah, it's one of those things where like I love everything about what Catelyn does in the scene. Slapping Bolton. Telling Robb to go. Like once Robb is sort of hit with the arrows. and he's crawling around on the ground. Like Catelyn finds, Walter's young wife from under the table, pulls her, puts a knife to her throat, is begging for Rob's life, like, let him go. There won't be any, retaliation. She's still negotiating. And Walter Frey is just like, why would I do that? You already broke one promise to me. And just like, the stress in her voice, in Catelyn's voice, like, this is where acting is poured on.
Yes.
This is a great sort of swan song.
I honestly think that like Michelle Fairley should have gotten an Emmy nomination for this.
Yeah, she went all in on this episode, and every single moment that she's on the screen during this wedding is magical, because it's like you have this strong woman, you have this mother that basically is watching something basically some real sadistic torture going on right in front of her with her son, stepdaughter, grandchild, that whole thing. It's like when life looked like it was really good, even though they're in the midst of war, life was looking good, and it's all taken away right from under them, and you realize like you were just led into it. Like you really should not have been there. Like just like everything that's probably going through her mind, it's like it's believable, how stressed the performance is, and ultimately, like, at the end of the day, it's like Walter Frey is like, yeah, go ahead and kill my my wife. It's like, I'll just find another one, and Catelyn, Rob stands up and he's like kind of like dying, and basically they kill him. And then Catelyn just
obviously first Roose Bolton obviously delivers Jaime's unintentionally harrowing final words, where he literally sticks the blade right in as he's after he already feels his dead wife's stomach. It's absolutely brutal. The thing that kind of
the Lannisters send their regards. Right?
The thing that still separates this one for me from Ned Stark's death is that Ned Stark's death was quick, it was sudden, it wasn't. This is a dragged out, extended sequence. You feel the horror, you feel the death, you feel the disgust, you feel the true loss of innocence here.
Rob's at one point is crawling around on the ground with 2 arrows in him, and like you said, he goes to his wife, he feels the stomach, but Walter Frey is like, oh, the King of the North rises, like they're basically, they have their prey trapped. It's not going to end well for them. They're just waiting for the death blow, and they're taunting him. And this is like, if we to go into NFL football terms, this is taunting. This is a yellow flag on the play. You can't do that type of stuff. But hey, it's. They can do whatever they want because they got the upper hand. So essentially that's what they're doing. This was a whole, like you said, Bolton planned this out, worked out a lot of details with the phrase, and, it is serving as torture. They stab him. Lannisters send their regards. And I was talking with you before. It's like, that's the last thing that Jaime says to Bruce Bolton before he heads to the wedding, is like, send the Lannisters the regards. So, it doesn't make sense that, necessarily Jaime, knew what was going on. But, the sort of like ironic part that, the last thing he says, is the message that is actually delivered. Bolton probably thought that was a nice touch and added it himself. And basically, there is sort of a little connection between Jaime and this incident. And, it's whether or not he knew about it, or, it's pointing out that he might be on the wrong side of things. It's a very nice connection that the show has made.
Yes, but either way, the final interaction, obviously, between Catelyn and Walder Frey is brutally cut short because Walder Frey ultimately dismisses and reveals that she has no true blackmail. It's her ultimate desperate last act as a mother, as a character on the show, as somebody who's trying to preserve. At that point, she could care less. She's like, look, the North, we've lost. Everything we've attempted has failed miserably in front of us. Now the only thing that I have is to possibly keep my son, who at the time she still believes could be her last son alive. And that fails even in front of her.
Dude,
and her final cry is, I'm like, Jesus, just give her the Emmy right there.
It's just like, Rob, walk out of here right now. Like,
and it's like, where? Past the mob of soldiers standing in front of the door?
Yeah, it's just like I said, the stress in her voice, like the voice change that, she goes from like the rest of the series to this moment, the desperation that's just put there. Like, I agree with you. Like, this performance in this moment really sells this scene and this sequence. And man, the last shots, like, we're basically ending on, two cut throats. It's just bloody, it's brutal. And, ultimately, when Catelyn goes down, it like hard cuts to credits, and you're just like, it's basically just like a nice
feeling empty.
Yeah, it's a mic drop moment for the show, because it's like, well, what's next?
Happened. What's next? What comes next? We've essentially lost all of our heroes. I literally had notes. I'm like, R.I.P. Catelyn Stark, Robb Stark, Talisa Stark, Grey Wind, the old farmer that died in the beginning. There were a lot of, obviously, all the soldiers that Dario, Jorah, and Grey Worm killed in the beginning. There's a lot of death that happens in this episode. This is a bloody episode. I think this episode had one of the highest TV death counts in a single hour of television for a while. Ultimately, just because it's so brutal how it's executed. As Tywin states, we're so kind of used to the idea of people dying on a battlefield, but something like a betrayal, like something like this, like a bunch of people dying in a dining hall, like people betraying them, that's something that we don't think of. That's something that is just so unsettling. This idea of kind of this break of civility, especially since Walder Frey violated guest rights, which is a term that's very sacrilegious almost in their.
Well, yeah. You go back to Greek mythology, right?
Right.
The concept of Xenia.
Yes, right. Yes.
It's one of those things, like when a guest comes into your home, you treat them right. And there are sort of, niceties around that and karma that goes with it. And the fact is, Walder Frey doesn't care. He really doesn't. And, he doesn't even necessarily do this. He strengthens his position. But there's a lot of it where he just does it out of spite. Like, he always felt like the North, and the Tullys and everybody sort of just looked down upon him. And, he just wanted some revenge, just for some, perceived slight against him and his family. And, ultimately, it's almost whimsical for Walder Frey to be a part of this plan. He just sort of fell in love with the idea of, betraying people that he knows and watching them suffer. And, he's an older man, so for him, maybe it didn't matter. Maybe it was just like, it's the end of my life. Maybe I should get some cheap thrills.
Wow. If that's his idea of cheap thrills, oh man, I can't even
look at it. Like, he's basically, he just kind of drinks, he enjoys his position. The whole sequence, when at first, when the crossbowmen come from the balcony and start shooting, he's kind of like a little nervous because maybe the Boltons will turn on him too. But then when, they start killing all of the Stark men and Robb, etc., and everything's working to plan, he just starts drinking the wine and enjoying, the dinner and a show. And it's one of those things where, who knows exactly what was going on in this character's mind. There's, some explanation that happens going forward to why he did this. Like I said, it's basically he always felt like the others, families that he betrayed looked down upon him. But ultimately, it's there's a little more to it that you can think about and just sort of try to dive deeper into the mind of this character. And we don't get much of this character from this point forward.
Right. We only get him one more time in season 6 before Arya kills him. So
exactly. So it's one of those things where like. This character kind of falls back into obscurity, the position that he was sort of always intended to have.
Yeah, season 6 ultimately does kind of play out like as this weird revenge for the Red Wedding, as this kind of like weird revenge for the Red Wedding kind of thing in a strange way between Jon with the Battle of the Bastards and then Arya taking care of the Freys ultimately, which is kind of interesting, obviously, because 3 from 6, it's kind of like a nice even break there. But so ultimately. That's the Red Wedding. And so I guess the only question now is where do we go from here? We're going to find out in the next couple of weeks. So just to give you guys a little bit of an update on the going behind the scenes of the Talkin' Thrones and the Talkin' TV family. So Pat and I are pre-recording this week and next week's episode for the season 3 finale. We'll be back live in order to premiere season 4. The week after that, the first week of December, and we will be doing one more episode. We'll be ending the first half of the Talkin' Thrones run with season 4, episode 2, The Lion and the Rose. Another, ironically enough, momentous wedding that unfortunately only resulted in one death, but still, it just results in some kind of death. So we will be doing that. We will be wrapping up 2021 with that, and before returning in 2022 for the second half of the show. Stay tuned for that. It's been an absolute blast, though, coming to you guys live every Sunday. We're going to continue that all the way up until the finale of the show. And you guys can continue to support us the way that you have been by clicking the subscribe button down below, clicking the bell next to it. That way you guys can get notified every time we put up new content. Also, be sure to follow us on the Talkin' TV Podcast, Facebook and Instagram at Talkin' TV Podcast. Pat, where can the good people follow you, as always?
Hey, listen, Dom, you can find me here Talking Thrones with you on the Talkin' TV channels. Also, I have an Instagram at Patrick W. Huber, and I might post something. You might see something there.
Hey,
this is pre-recorded. I can't promise anything, but
nice.
Hey, by the time you see this, maybe there's a new post there.
Nice.
Who knows?
Nice. Who knows? Sounds good, ultimately. But, of course, you can follow me, of course, on Facebook and Instagram at Movie Nerd Reviews. That's where you can see everything that I post or don't, just in general, when I post like once every 3 months, maybe. But that's it. We'll be back next week for the season 3 finale. Can't believe it. We're done already. It's another season in the books of Talkin' Thrones and Game of Thrones right here on the Talkin' TV channel. Watch more fucking movies. 12 seasons in a short film. See you guys next time.